This is the Maine Report, a public affairs program produced by the New England School of Communications.
Hi, welcome to the Maine Report. I'm your host, Leah Labrie, and today we're going to talk about the role of a news producer, a role that is often overlooked but also has just as much power. Today with me, I have Chantel Haltizer, a news producer at the WABI news station. Hi, Chantel. How are you today? Thank you so much for coming and meeting with me today.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. So first of all, why did you become a producer?
Well, that's kind of a hard one to answer in the sense that I actually didn't go to school to become a producer.
Okay.
I went to school, I got my undergrad in sociology and a minor in history, and then I went and got my master's degree in human development and family studies because I thought I was going to become a counselor. But after I graduated, the market had taken a downturn and there wasn't a lot of job opportunities, and I had to rethink about what I was going to do. My grandfather was chief engineer at Channel 6, and I had grown down in Portland, and I had grown up with news in my blood and always loved it. And so I reached out to Jim Morris, who is the news director at WABI TV5 here in Bangor, and I asked him how could I possibly, not having gone to school, maybe get my foot in the door. And he told me to become a associate producer. So I reached out and there were no job opportunities. So it kind of looked like maybe that was going to go away. Fast forward 6 months, and the Iraq War actually made it so that a position opened up because our chief photographer went over to fight overseas, and that opened up a position. Jim remembered having talked with me, and he reached out to me and asked me if I'd be interested in the job. Even though I didn't have any sort of producing experience, I said sure. And so I took it on and realized very quickly that it was a job that was meant for me.
Okay. So how long have you been a producer at ABI?
I've been producing there for 12 years.
Wow, that's
starting my 13th, yeah.
Wow, that's a long time.
It is.
And your contract is for how long?
Producers actually don't have contracts.
Really?
Right. So on-air talent has contracts, and maybe in bigger markets they possibly do, but producers here in Bangor do not have contracts.
Why is that?
I'm not really sure, to be honest with you.
Have you ever decided on moving to a different segment, such as, not segment, but a bigger market, such as, i.e., Portland or Washington, D.C., or even Boston, or?
Yeah, I think everybody considers that at some point in their life, for sure. One of the things, though, I really enjoy living in Bangor. I grew up in southern Maine. I moved up to Bangor, went to the University of Maine. I really like the area, and so being able to be doing a job that I enjoy in a market that I love is wonderful for me. So, you know, there's always a possibility if you go to a different market, you can make more money than you do in a smaller market. But you also have to balance the other things in your life that, the other kinds of quality of life things. And for me, living in the Bangor area is something that makes me happy.
Do you think that anybody could be a producer, or do you think it really takes someone of a special group in order to achieve such a large role?
I'm sure anybody who had their heart set on it could train themselves to be a producer. That being said, I think that it does take a certain kind of individual. I think you need to have somebody who has a lot of energy, somebody who can multitask, even though they say you can't actually multitask in the world, as close as you can to multitask, because you need to be able to keep your hand on and your eyes on so many different things at one time. You need to be able to have somebody who can not get distracted by the little things, remember to pick up the small pieces, not only work on your own work, but you're also keeping tabs on everybody else.
Okay, when you say keeping tabs on everybody else, what do you mean by that?
Okay, so one of the jobs as a producer going prior to a show, because most people think, what does a producer do? What does a producer do? So producer is kind of a twofold kind of job. You have your prior to the show aspect, and I'll go into that in a second, and then you have actually during the show.
Okay.
So prior to the show, a good analogy is you're kind of like an air traffic controller. On one hand, you have your own work to do, which you're writing scripts, editing video, editing teases, stacking the show, putting the rundowns together with the order of the show, that kind of thing. But you're also keeping tabs on all the reporters. What are they doing? Is their work done? Are their scripts done? And then you're also looking over their scripts. So you're kind of making sure all the planes are landing in time for the actual show. And then during the show itself, if you've done your job well and everything has gone right, hopefully the show itself is really simple and you just go straight through it, and there's not too many changes. But news is the kind of business where you have breaking news. So during that show, you are not only guiding the director who's taken all of your cues as to what's going on, but you're watching the wires, you're looking on Facebook and Twitter during the show to make sure you're not missing anything. Because if something new happens that you need to incorporate in the show, you now need to be able to add that in and then communicate that not only with the director but with the talent, and also have it online. So say closed captioning, things like that, all those pieces have to come together and you have to be able to pull that in. And during the show, it's your job to kind of land that plane and make sure that everything times out.
Okay. And so you pretty much kind of slid right into my next question. Can you just describe to me what it's like the day in the life of a producer?
Day in the life of the producer. Okay, first of all, it starts before you even step foot into your studio.
Really?
Because yes, you need to be able to pay attention to all of the things that are going on in the world. So prior to me coming in, usually I'll watch the 11 o'clock news the night before, or I'll check out the morning news before I come in, because I don't want to be caught off guard. One of the keys to being a good producer is being prepared. And part of being prepared is knowing what's happening. And so before I even step foot into the door, I pretty much know what's going on, knock on wood, provided that I've had that time to do that, but I make time to do that. I walk in, I sit down at my desk, and then I start to look over the last 12 hours of shows, because of course news is a 24-hour business. What's new from when I left the night before, what kind of things have happened, et cetera, et cetera. From there, I produce both the noon, I used to produce the noon and the 6 o'clock, excuse me. I now produce the 5. I start to figure out what kind of things do I want to bring over, because you have a 24-hour cycle. So you want to have the things that obviously from the last 12 hours can be included, but also I want to infuse as much new product and new information that I can share with people as possible. With my 5 p.m. show, I have both local and national and international. So at that point, I start deciding what kind of national, international stories do I want to include. So I will go through, start grabbing those from CNN a lot of times. It takes dragging it over. I do a lot of the editing myself, figure out what those stories are, put them in their place. In the meantime, we're going to have a morning meeting, and where we meet with the assignment editor, news director, assistant news director, and reporters, figure out what's going on for the day. So fast forward a little bit, reporters go out, and they come, they're working on all of their stories. Then we have another afternoon meeting where we decide what story is going in which show, and we divide up with another producer of that day. We make those divisions. I start building the show, stacking it as another word for that. And then so I have to just keep up with writing scripts from The Wire, editing. I mean, you're just busy the whole time. And the biggest thing is you want to make sure that when I build that show, that the director knows my vision. So when they go to mark that show, they know exactly what I'm looking for. And that's a huge part. And then of course, once that's all done, we actually have the show itself, which is live. And then you take over and make sure that the timing works out during the actual program.
Okay, so it definitely sounds a lot like being a puppeteer and you're working with all of these different marionettes at the same time.
Yes.
Okay, and you also mentioned a lot of editing. So that would infer that you need to be a good writer.
Yes, you need to be a good writer, and you need to be able, need to be able to not only write to the script, but also make sure that the moving pictures, obviously, that you know, match up to what you're looking for. You don't do as much writing as the other reporters, obviously, but national stuff, national stories, things off the wire, you're going to rework those, and you're also going to, if there's breaking news, a lot of times that lands in your lap. So let's say, for an example, it's 10 minutes to the show. I have, say, a 5 o'clock show. It's 4:50. We've sent a reporter out to a car accident or to a fire, and they are now tweeting back information about it. Great. What I do then is I take the information from their tweets, because they're our reporter, I trust them. Maybe they have a picture of let's say it's a fire, have a picture of that fire. In that 10-minute time span, I will take that picture of the fire, make it into a full screen, and I will write a script based on his tweets. And it could be something as simple as, you know, this is what we know about it, we have a crew on the scene, we'll have more as it becomes available. It could be that short. Or I could actually have a fair amount of information. In that amount of time, I have to be able to put it together on the fly and make sure that it airs in time, probably for the top story that's going to happen in the next 10 minutes.
Okay. So for a breaking story day, that sounds really hectic.
Yes.
Okay. So being a producer, and as I said, you are pretty much the puppeteer. You're having all of these different puppets going at 10 different directions at once. That's a pretty hectic job. And you not only have to do that, but you have to be a writing, you have to be an editor, you have to sometimes assist your reporters in finding sources. I even know of one of my friends who's an associate producer. He has to sometimes video edit. Yes. So you're essentially doing all of this at once, all at the same time. How do you keep a level head during that?
I don't know. I'm lucky because it comes natural to me. That's the kind of thing where it goes back to your first question about, you know, could anybody be a producer? I think anybody could. If somebody isn't naturally inclined towards being organized, I think they're going to struggle a little bit more. But you just kind of have to just have a mental checklist, or you could have a physical checklist of things that you know you need to do, and then make sure that everything is where it needs to be. You're keeping track of all those details.
Okay. We're going to take a short break right now. When we come back, we're going to look more into the life of being a producer. Stay tuned.
Cinderella found the pet that fits her perfectly. Tiana gave her pet the royal treatment. Belle found beauty where no one else did. And you can too. Share your heart. Share your love. Bring home your forever friend. Make a shelter pet part of your world. Happily Ever After begins at theshelterpetproject.org.
Everybody has a dream. Mine was to see the ocean. And with a little help, I made it.
And welcome back to the Maine Report. I'm your host, Leah Labrie, and we're talking with Chantel Hatzizer. Sorry, I keep butchering your name. And we're talking more about what it's like to be a producer. You're the producer at WABI TV News right here in Bangor.
Yes.
All right. So earlier you talked about how you're lucky, how you have to keep a level head, and it's just something that comes naturally to you. When you get stressed on the job, because everybody gets stressed on the job, let's face it. What do? Do you kind of just sit at your desk and meditate a little, or do you have this big bowl of candy next to you, or do you read a lot? Like, what do you do?
Well, part of my way to keep my stress under control is to actually be as prepared as possible ahead of time to minimize the amount of stress I take on. So I might come in a little bit earlier or stay a little bit later or that kind of thing to set myself up for success so that I don't actually, that's one of my ways I mitigate stress. But obviously crazy things happen, whatnot. It depends on the kind of stress that it is. If it's during, prior to the show, I might excuse myself, go outside and just kind of like, you know, not scream, but just kind of, you know, let out some frustration for a little bit, walk back in, okay, I'm good. Okay. During a show, you don't have that kind of time.
Right.
So I use the stress to feed the beast, if you will. So like during an election, for instance, election nights are crazy, especially for producers. Sometimes you have 8, 9 live shots, different elements you have to be able to pull in. And the stress can definitely make or break somebody. I try and take that stress and channel it into the product. And then after it's all done, that might actually be when I have my anxiety moment, is when it's all said and done. I can kind of like keep it at bay, but it comes out eventually.
Okay, so it's kind of like doing your 5 Ps. Prior planning prevents poor performance.
There you go.
Okay. When you, and obviously as a producer, you have the ability to say what goes into the show and what stays out.
Yes.
Have you ever had to nix an idea or a story that a reporter really wanted to follow up on? So, and what did you do while during that?
Usually if a reporter is that passionate about something, we find a way to work it in, but there's always parameters that you have to keep in mind. And so if there are specific things about that story, and I can't think of one off the top of my head, but if there's something about that particular story, I will work with the reporter and say, make sure you avoid XYZ because of whatever reasons those are, or you need to incorporate something. Off the top of my head, I can't think, but there has been moments where we've decided not to pursue things, or personally we've made choices that other news stations might decide to run the name of somebody who was in an accident. We might choose not to. It all depends on how sensitive the situation is. We try to be sensitive that the people that we're covering, this is their lives. To us, it's one 5-second story, 30-second story, but this is, you're telling people's lives stories, and you want to be responsible for that. So then we'll actually think about those kind of things when making a decision of what we're going to put onto the newscast.
Okay. What have you learned while you've been on the job for these 13 years, or going on 13 years?
Oh my goodness, I learn all the time. I'm constantly bringing in new things, and you know, you guys at NESCOM will come in at different stages and teach us a whole bunch of new things that are different from, you know, even 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 2 years ago. And so it's kind of nice when somebody brings in new techniques and ways to do things that are faster, better, you know, that kind of stuff I'm constantly learning. But I think the biggest thing is just learning about people and stories, and you know, it's not just the job itself, it's you are part of living history. And so I'm constantly learning from those kind of situations and scenarios.
Okay. What kind of advice do you have for those who want to enter into the producing world, such as myself?
I would say if you really want to become a producer, just immerse yourself in it. That's the best way that you can do it. Know that you're going to have your ups, you're going to have your downs. It's going to be crazy, but it's also going to be very rewarding and satisfying. So if you just throw yourself in, be as prepared as you can ahead of time, set yourself up for success, and you will be successful.
Okay, well, thank you so much. That's all the time that we have for today. Be sure to tune in for our next edition of the Maine Report. Have a great day.